Welcome to the SysAdmin Weekly Podcast, a projectrunspace.org podcast. This is the show by sysadmins, for sysadmins, and those tireless tech folks working in the trenches every day, either on-prem or in the cloud. My name is Andy Syrewicze, and you're watching episode 0 because in IT, we start at 0, right? And, of course, I'm joined by my partner in crime. I've got Eric Siron here. How's it going, Eric?
All right. How you doing?
Doing good. Hey, you know, I got to say, I know you're setting up new office space, but it looks like you're joining us from, you know, like a freshly built bomb shelter or something. It doesn't look that bad. I'm just being a jerk.
I am actually in an authentic basement, although not the one from the fake little background here. So yeah, it looks a little bomb sheltery when I take all the things down
No,
too.
you're fine. You're fine. It's work in progress, I know, but it's good to have you, my friend. And this is, of course, episode 0, right? And you and I, of course, we've worked together on webinars and other podcasts. Not our own podcast like this show, but we've worked on other stuff in the past, and I got to say, it's good to have a show that, you know, we are both regular hosts on, so I'm looking forward to this. I think it's going to be fun, and hopefully the listeners/viewers, depending on how you're consuming this content, will enjoy it as well. And so I guess maybe, Eric, being this is episode 0, maybe we should start with, like, who are these two talking heads that are, you know, in front of you here? And I guess I'll selfishly start with myself. My name is Andy Syrewicze. I have been in the tech industry for, I've lost count now, 23 years, I think. I have a lot more gray hair now than when I started, of course. But I've always been in the infrastructure world in some way, shape, or form, either on-prem or in the cloud or M365. And more recently, the last several years, I've had very much a security focus. My entire career has been involved in MSPs in some way, shape, or form, either as a customer of MSPs or working in various capacities within an MSP, or now I work for a security vendor that supports MSPs. So it's been an interesting world, and definitely have lots of stories and helpful insights, hopefully, to share with all those sysadmins that are in the trenches. And now that I'm selfishly done talking about myself, I'll pass it over to you, Eric.
You did forget that you're an MVP and very much a known quantity in your various workspaces.
That's true. I'm glad you brought that up, and I guess I'll mention it really quickly. I am a Microsoft MVP. I was originally, and it's relevant to today's topic, I was originally a Hyper-V MVP, and then I was a Cloud and Data Center Management MVP for many, many, many years, and most recently have switched to the security competency. So I'm now a security MVP. And now I'll pass it over to you, Eric.
All right. So I did my first real IT job in 1998. I have done just about everything in the typical. So I did phone, call center support for big vendors and help desk in smaller places, and worked my way into, I'm probably better with computers than with people. And so I got myself into data centers and then realized, well, maybe I'm not quite as bad with people as I thought. So now I've started doing this kind of stuff. I do have a big soft spot for the small and medium businesses. I've worked with a lot of people I have my one company and my annual budget of like $1,500. And then 5-10 user places that are still like $5,000-$6,000 annual IT budget. So I'm used to working with really small things, and then up more into 400 or 500 where the rules change. And I do have experience in the larger enterprises, but their problems don't interest me as much because they can just keep throwing money at it until it goes away. So I really like working with the more challenging, smaller places that they have to watch every dollar, but they still have to get just as much done with it. So yeah, lately I've been working predominantly in the healthcare space. So a lot of regulation and a lot of, again, still budgeting constraints, so on and so forth.
Right. And don't sell yourself short. You are MVP as well, my friend.
I am. I have been a cloud and data center since 2017. That's just what I do. But I consider myself, even though it's not official, I consider Hyper-V my focus because it's kind of where my passion is and what I do when the cameras are off and when I'm not at work. And, I have hobbies like a regular person, but I also will tinker around with Hyper-V because I enjoy it. So,
Oh yeah. You're that guy in the basement tinkering with Hyper-V and doing mad
I'm not
science
literally
stuff
in the
with it.
basement tinkering with Hyper-V. That's awesome.
Well, just for those folks that may not be aware, we keep saying that we're Microsoft MVPs. We're part of the Microsoft MVP program. If you want more information on that program, you can go to mvp.microsoft.com. Last I knew, if I remember correctly, that's still the
Still
address,
works.
has been for a long
Yep.
time. And basically, it's a large community of tech experts, community leaders, fantastic community, and I think the biggest thing for me is that we kind of have that that tight connection with Microsoft. So all the new fancy stuff that's coming out, we kind of, get to, share all that information with people as soon as it's released, right? So it's always fun to do that. So anyway, with that, I guess let's get on to a couple other housekeeping items here before we get to our main topic for the episode. And just as an FYI, not every intro is going to be this long. We're going to have some housekeeping stuff with every episode, but I figure it's episode 0. We should introduce ourselves. We should introduce the show. There's one other entity, I guess I will say, that we need to introduce, and that is Project Runspace, because I just got done saying in the intro, this is a projectrunspace.org podcast, right? And you're probably wondering, what is Project Runspace? And Eric, I'll let you run with that. Tell us what Project Runspace is. I could do it, but you explain it so much better than I do. So
Thank you. I hope that turns out to be true. I'd like to do this quickly and succinctly. Um, so when I was kind of thinking of what do I want to be when I grow up, a lot of it, I looked at a lot of the really interesting work that's being done to onboard next generation type folks. And people who are otherwise disenfranchised from technology. I grew up with computers in a time when that was weird. I had people in my house. I had computers in my house back in the 80s, and a lot of people didn't have that. And then as time marched on and they became cheaper, more and more people have computers in their house. A lot of people still don't to this day. Having a computer in my house accelerated how quickly I was able to enter the field, more than any other boost you could possibly think of, just having
right.
one available. And I learned a lot of things I feel like people who are going through now, like boot camps and such things, don't really pick up. I mean, I run into a lot of people in the field that's like they're smart, but they don't get it in a lot of ways. And so I was looking again, coming back to how other things are introducing new people into the fold. Like you have a lot of the coding camps, and not just the ones that you pay for, but like the outreach type, like Girls Who Code and Hour of Code. And I can't even think of all of them. The
There's a
problem I
bunch,
had with
yeah.
all those is they're so programming focused. And I don't think everybody wants to be a programmer that wants to be in technology. Like, I really don't feel, I do enjoy programming quite a bit, but I don't feel like that's my drive. I don't think I could feel like having somebody come down and go, this is what we want you to do for a living day to day, day in, day out. Like, I don't really think that's me. I like being a sysadmin. And I don't feel like I feel like there's this huge hole there for people who want to get into systems administration or even help desk stuff now that I think about it. Like just actually that part of where you're taking the stuff that other people have built and trying to connect it to the people who want to use it. And we are those people. You'll hear developers frequently say, tongue in cheek, though, well, it works on my machine. And our job and belief is that it should work on your machine too. And I feel like there's a hole in how we educate people who are trying to follow in my footsteps, not personally and individually, but getting into sysadmin, trying to rise up to the senior levels of that. Not be the guy on the phone that everybody's like, oh no, I'm talking to this guy on the phone. You want to be the person when they call you that you're going to get stuff fixed. And I think there's a huge part that just doesn't get relayed into the next group. And that's
Agreed.
really what Project Runspace is about, is that education. Here's how we did it. Here's how you can do it. Trying to be an outreach and hit people that don't have the resources that and opportunities that we had.
Right.
And just, I want to retire, and I want people who come after me to be at least as good as I am, preferably better.
Yep. I think that's a perfect description, and I also think that's a perfect description of what this podcast is all about as well, too, right? And that is helping sysadmins, again, like I said in the intro, that are in the trenches today doing an ultimately thankless job. That was one of my bullet points I wanted to highlight here, is that being a sysadmin is a thankless job. It really is. I remember my days, doing frontline end user support, and it is absolutely thankless for the most part. There are the rare exceptions, right? But I think another key things for me, as far as what the show is all about, is sysadmins are continuously being asked to do more with less, right? So not only are we having to take care of all the things that we have always taken care of, we're having to do so in a more optimized fashion, hopefully. Um, Keeping up to date is becoming more difficult because we have to stay up to date on more technologies than ever before, right? Not only on-prem, but in the cloud as well, and cloud-native technologies and all that, right? Um, and then I think the other big one for me, and you and I have, we've had coffees, I think, and talked about this before, Eric, is that it really feels like on-prem sysadmins have kind of been left behind, in my opinion, as far as the industry goes, right? And don't get
Absolutely.
me, don't get me wrong, the cloud is great. It does a lot of great things. The agility of the cloud is fantastic. I love that I can click a few buttons and spin up a virtual machine in a few minutes. It's great, but it's not the end-all be-all for every organization. And so with that, I think from a innovation perspective, um, just a community outreach perspective, I think on-prem sysadmins have been left behind. And so I think that's a big crux for us as part of the show as well, too, is to not be 100% cloud focused all the time. Sometimes let's talk about those on-premises technologies. And I think one good thing for us to talk about as a future episode, I just thought of, Eric, is how as an industry we're kind of seeing a little bit of a swing back to on-premises for various reasons, which we'll get into,
Mhm.
of course. But and as far as what we'll cover on the show, with that in mind, I think it's going to be this, that, and everything else that a sysadmin might have to touch in their day-to-day. That's how I see it. I don't know if there's anything you want to add to that, Eric.
Perfect. That's exactly it. That, especially, how many times have you seen people trying to solve the same problem over and over and over? Like,
Yep.
this wheel is quite round, and how do we get those resources in front of the people so that they don't have to do that? Like, oh yeah, I know what that is. That's a DNS problem. Let me knock that out real quick.
It's
Rather
always
than
DNS. It's always DNS,
it's
right?
always DNS. Yeah, the very first article I posted on Runspace was exactly that, because
It's
you learn
always DNS.
DNS and you're good. You'll go far.
Man, whenever I hear that saying, I think back to an issue I troubleshot many years ago. We had an internal service that would just randomly fall on its face like every 4 weeks, just for no reason, inexplicably. Come to find out that its secondary DNS server um, didn't exist anymore. So
Oh, that's new.
it would hit the primary like all the time, and it would be
Except when it
fine.
didn't.
But once in a while, it would go ping that secondary for whatever reason, and when it did, the service would fall on its face, And anyway, good times. It's
Oh, I
always
mean,
DNS.
that's interesting. You nail that, because that's the one thing I cannot quite convince people. Just because the primary DNS server is available, there's nothing in any of the RFCs that says you have to use the primary if it's available. It'll use whatever it wants to use. Why does it randomly pick the second one? I don't know. Does it? 100% it does. So, yeah. Oh, all these weird things. Oh, yeah. I bet there's something wonky between your primary and secondary. And, yeah. Anyway, yeah. It's always
So that's
DNS.
a perfect example of the type of stuff we're going to talk about in the show, right? In more detail than that, but and of course, people who have watched any of the content that I've put out before. They know I love to tell stories, so that won't be the last story you hear on the show. So,
No. My father's favorite saying was always, any story worth telling is worth improving. So not only do the stories get better, they're always fun. And if they weren't fun the last time I told it, it'd be more fun the next time. So there you are.
that's right. That's right. So, well, Eric, we're 15 minutes in. I feel like we've done a good job of introducing ourselves, introducing the show, talking about Project Runspace. For episode 0, we do have a topic lined up today. And of course, you've probably seen it in the title. We are, of course, talking about the fact that no, Hyper-V is not dead. And this is a, how do I want to say it? This is a sore spot for both you and I, Eric, I think. I always like to quote Peter Griffin. You know, we're big Family Guy fans here in our house. You know what really grinds my gears? Is, of course, what he always says. And, well, there has been this pervasive, I don't know if I want to say rumor or misinterpretation that Hyper-V is dead, deprecated, not supported, ABCXYZ, whatever, right? And I guess the other thing I should do before I move on with this thought process is, if you're not familiar with what Hyper-V is Microsoft's hypervisor that is baked into Windows Server and across a whole plethora of products inside of their stack. And so there's been, like I said, this rumor that Hyper-V is dead. You've probably seen posts about that out in the industry. And I think where I first remember seeing this pop up, Eric, and I'd be curious to see if this is the same for you as well, is there was a number of threads that were coming out of various VMware communities that when Hyper-V Server ceased to be a product, they said Hyper-V was dead. Now, if you're not familiar with Hyper-V, like Eric and I are, you're probably being like, well, Hyper-V Server is gone, Andy, so how is it not dead? So you're going to hear me complain about this on, I'm sure, numerous episodes of this show. Microsoft is terrible at naming things. They're absolutely terrible at naming things. And so you have Hyper-V, which is a role inside of Windows Server. Microsoft also decided to have a free version of their hypervisor product that they called Hyper-V Server, not confusing at all. And I really think this was a competitive strategy with the free ESXi hypervisor at the time, right? And so basically Microsoft said, we're not going to offer this free Hyper-V Server thing anymore. It was pared down. It was literally Windows Server Core with the Hyper-V role, some storage and networking stuff, and that was about it. You could do clustering as well, but when that free SKU of it basically went away, that's when these rumors started. I don't know if you've experienced anything else or heard anything else, Eric, but that's where I remember it starting anyway.
Yeah, that's the same thing here. Oh, they're killing Hyper-V. Like, no. And also think of the source. I know of a couple of people who are prominent in the VMware community who are always super anti Hyper-V. And I thought it was interesting because they went from, oh, well, Hyper-V is terrible for all these reasons. And they would come up with some really awful reasons. Like, those are dumb. And over time, it became, well, it's like, I think you guys feel kind of threatened. And then as soon as Hyper-V Server got ended, those same people were like, yeah, see, look, they killed it because they couldn't keep it going. Like, sure.
And then, of course, you look at what's happening in the VMware space today.
Yeah.
How the turntables.
And I feel a little bad. I remember when VMware first came around and there was this tiny, scrappy little company who was really into some really amazing technology, just really great people.
Oh, yeah, sure.
And in the second generation of that company, they forced out a lot of the founders and a lot of people who made it that scrappy little fun company. And it turned into this thing that was probably always destined to become what it is now. I hate to say it. the quality of their corporation declined almost instantly. And it's really sad. It's really sad because they had the potential to do so much more and be so much more, and they just
And I'm glad
they
you brought that
capitalized
up.
on it. They made a lot of money on it, but I don't feel
Yeah.
like they ever.
And I'm glad
Yeah,
you brought that up because it was a very good product for a long time. I mean, I was a VMware administrator before I was a Hyper-V administrator.
as was
I
I.
cut my teeth on, boy, it was before they even rebranded it as vSphere. I cut my teeth on ESX version 3, if I remember right. I think I touched a couple of version 2 machines. And so, I mean, like, it was fantastic when it came out. And like you said, it just got gobbled up a couple of times. And I feel like there was also an era where I don't know, I feel like they had the strategy of like, hey, let's develop this thing and throw it against the wall and see if it sticks, right? They had a couple of products that they came out with that, excuse me, they felt like that was just the strategy. And it was, yeah, so it's been hard to see like, the decline of VMware, essentially. Of course, they're owned by Broadcom now, if you've not heard that. And that's a whole episode in and of itself, talking about what Broadcom has done to VMware. Just take a Google search out there and take a look. That's outside the scope of episode 0. Let's put it there. So, but I think bringing this back to Hyper-V, what I wanted to talk about, one, we've talked about like where the rumor started. We've talked about the fact that no, Hyper-V is not dead. In fact, and this is where I'm going next with this, Hyper-V is a critical, super, super important component of Microsoft's entire business strategy. And I say that because it is present in so many things. So Hyper-V was always present in Windows Server, and it still is today. You go out and install Windows Server 2025, Hyper-V is there as a usable role if you want to. Excuse me. Hyper-V is, of course, available on Windows 10, Windows 11. I think it's just the Pro SKUs, if I remember right. I don't remember if it's
Pro
there on home or not.
Enterprise, and then there's another oddball SKU I always forget about. It's not in
Yep,
home.
it's not on home, yeah. So it is also available in Azure Local. And unless you've been really up to date on the news from Microsoft Ignite back in November, Azure Local is the new name for Azure Stack HCI, which is basically a packaged up version of, I don't want to say Windows Server, but it's not really
Yeah, it's
Windows.
really hard to put a good category on that, doesn't it?
So it's a packaged up on-premises install of Hyper-V, Storage Spaces Direct, which is the hyper-converged storage component in Windows Server, as well as software-defined networking. And then it uses, excuse me, I'm just getting over a cold. And then it uses Azure Arc as its management plane. Arc is basically pulls in on-premises resources or resources living in other clouds into the management plane of Microsoft Azure. That's a whole other episode in and of itself, talking about that. But basically, that's like a cloud-managed on-premises infrastructure, basically, is what Azure Local is. Hyper-V is a core component of that strategy. Hyper-V is also the core hypervisor that underpins the entire Microsoft Azure cloud ecosystem. So it is, you can only imagine how many instances of Hyper-V are present just because of that. And then this one always surprises people. Hyper-V actually runs on Xbox. And, that often surprises people. You've got if I remember correctly, it's been a long time since I've looked at the inner workings of Hyper-V on Xbox, but if I remember correctly, there was a VM present that did all the gaming stuff, and another VM present that did like all the media type of content, if I remember correctly. My information might be dated there. I don't think I've owned a Xbox since the original Xbox One, so it's been a while for me. Anyway, anything I left out there, Eric?
It does seem like there are things missing, and I don't know because it pops up in a lot of strange places.
It does, yeah.
One thing I would like to kind of give people a little bit more history on too is if you are kind of old on Microsoft technologies, like some of us on this podcast here. The first time I saw the term virtual machine was on Windows 3 because that's how it used DOS. It used DOS in a virtual machine. Or was it Windows 95? I don't know. It's been a while. But virtual machines, the concept isn't new. What VMware did is they carried us over that threshold to make a fully virtualized computer. But the basic concept of it has been with us for a long time and has been in Windows for a very long time. And Hyper-V, then, when it came across, all of a sudden they're like, well, all this stuff, look at all these, think about all these things we can do. And they're using it in ways I think that most of us have not even really considered. But there's a lot of security aspects of it.
Yep.
It's just, it's embedded in just about everything that Microsoft does. I think is the real point that you were going after, that if it's got a Microsoft brand on it, it's probably got at least a little bit of Hyper-V going on in it somewhere. So there's the Windows subsystem for Linux. There's the Windows Sandbox. There's I can't even remember. So a lot of the newer security features are coming out with have some components at least of Hyper-V built into them. So basically the point that we're coming to here is that without Hyper-V, there is no modern Microsoft. None of those products exist.
Correct.
It's just, then they're just back to Office and stuff like that. You don't have, for all I know, Office uses parts of it too now. I don't know.
Well, I mean, it's probably not that much of a stretch to imagine that parts of Exchange Online probably run on top of Hyper-V in some way, shape, or form, right? I don't know that as 100% fact, but I can make an educated guess that that's probably how it's architected.
I mean, anyway, you can look at, I need to abstract something, some part of the computer, especially for security purposes, would be great. Address translation, like, oh, here, attackers are going to hit the spot in memory. What if that really wasn't that spot in memory because of virtualization? I mean, the applications just go on and on and on, so.
Yep, for sure. So, Hyper-V is not dead. It's everywhere, and it's not going away anytime soon.
No.
Because it is embedded in literally everything over at Microsoft in some way, shape, or form.
Yes.
So,
and for the most relevant part, I think for us is that hypervisor, that plain old hypervisor that we have been using since 2008 is still with us, still being advanced, still being developed. If you're like I get a question, well, can it run at scale? Like, well, I guess if you're planning on building something larger than Azure, I don't know. But at least up until that point, yes, it does work at scale.
You know, that's the other thing that in the VMware versus Hyper-V debate that always drove me crazy is like, well, VMware can support, 200 virtual processors. No, well, Hyper-V can do 300 now. There's always this arms race, right? And I was just like, okay, guys, both of you support such insane amounts that, the 99.9% of us are never going to use them. We're never going to see those limits, right?
No.
I'm
good. Most of my VMs have 2 CPUs and 4 to 8 gigs of RAM. I'm good, guys.
Yep.
And I'm talking, this is at large installations too, like 2, 4, maybe 8 CPU. I don't, these things, they're just, okay. All right. Happy for you. I really am.
That sounds about right for sure. So, well, we've kind of answered the question, right? Or verified the key point of this episode. No, Hyper-V is not dead. I know there's a lot of folks out there that, especially given the recent troubles from Broadcom with VMware, a lot of people are in this situation where they need to switch their infrastructure from VMware, from vSphere, because their licenses were increasing in cost by, I've heard some cases, 1,000% increase. 1,000% increase,
300% was not uncommon.
Yeah. Yep. And so a lot of people are in that mode where they're like, okay, we have to switch in the next 6 months or whatever, right? And
Very short time.
Yep. Where I always kind of point folks to, if they want to learn more about Hyper-V, is Microsoft Learn. That's like your first stop, right? Learn.microsoft.com. You'll find more information out there about Hyper-V than you ever wanted to know, right? So, and then before I move on, Eric, any resources that you feel really strongly about that we should include here?
Oh, that's a fantastic question. Part of it is in my drive to become like a really good expert on it, I spend a lot of time actually with Copilot and then getting mad at Copilot because it knows less than I do. So it's kind of nice to use Copilot to kind of cut through because I'll search for things and okay, that's not really what I was looking for. And then so the chat aspect of Copilot has helped, to okay, you're kind of getting where I'm going. Let me refine this a little bit better than like retyping the same search over and over until you hit what you want. But honestly, I think if you use Copilot as a chat device and not a search device, you may get to what you're looking for faster. What I really like about Learn, though, is it's good for coming in on a flat-footed technology. You're like, I
Yep.
really don't know what I'm doing. I've never used this before. All brand new to it. Learn is really good for that now. They've got so many with the labs and the like start here, bam, 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 bam,
Yeah.
do this, take this skills check. It's actually, yeah, I'm a huge fan of Learn. But if you feel like you're past that, I honestly I'm going to plug for Copilot Chat here. I know that's kind of a weird thing to do, but
It's
remember to
gotten
use it
really
as a
good.
chat, not as a Google, because it's not what it's for. It's not intended for that. It'll do that, but ask it a question. If you don't like the answer, then say okay, change that part. Instead of like we'll go in and retype. Well, that search criteria didn't work right, and then just reformulate the same thing. Don't do that with a Copilot chat. Go back and go. This is the part I need more information on. This is the part you didn't really seem to understand me on, and refine it. Use it as a chat, not as a search engine. And becoming a huge advocate for that now. So
That's kind of the same way. I was really skeptical at first, and maybe that's the old gray hairs in my beard. I was like, what's this AI thing?
yeah.
Blah blah blah. But it actually works really well for that. So,
Well, I
um,
mean, I think, and I noticed a lot. Not just it wasn't just you, because I ran into it, and then other people. And the more I realized, like where we're struggling is we keep refining the same question and not
right.
using it as a chat system. And that is where we broke it. And as soon as we started to go, okay, let me chat with it, let me talk to it, that's when it gets better. That's when its usefulness really starts to pop out. You're like, I need refinement on that. I need to, well, that wasn't exactly what I meant to say, whatever, and actually chatting with it for real.
Right. And I will say, and I'm not going to dive into it entirely here. We will be covering Hyper-V in a lot more detail on the show, I'm sure. But if you're brand new to Hyper-V, you're coming from VMware, go look up cluster shared volumes, CSVs, and learn. The reason I say that is a lot of people think standing up a cluster is identical in Hyper-V as it is in VMware. I have
Nope.
seen people stand up clusters in Hyper-V without cluster shared volumes, and then they wonder why their VMs are becoming corrupted on disk. There's a reason. Go look at cluster shared volumes if you never have before. Anyway.
Yes. Storage and networking are going to be the two biggest hurdles coming over from VMware. Most other
Yep.
things work close enough. I mean, behind the scenes, there's like the CPU stuff is all different, but you'll be okay with that. You're not going to struggle with that very much. What is going to kill you is networking and storage.
Yeah. I
So
think we should
yeah,
do.
Andy, 100% on, yeah, get out there to learn. Make sure you're looking at the clustering stuff because Hyper-V runs just fine in standalone. And we're going to need
Yep.
to talk about that too, because I've had a lot of
I think
people
so.
I've caught, they ask me, well, are you clustering that? Like, no, actually those are all standalone hosts, and kind of look at me sideways like, what? Like, yeah, I
And
have,
then,
depending on what problem I'm trying to solve, I may prefer a standalone box. And
yep.
kind of
And
the,
then, of course,
what?
we can get into that whole discussion of Hyper-V running inside of a domain, and we can get into that whole thing. I think it'd be useful for us to do an episode as well on here is this feature on the VMware side, here's the equivalent on the Hyper-V side, right?
Yes.
So we
Or
can kind of
because a lot of times you
dive
don't
into all
find
that.
equivalents, and I think that's what's kind of snaps people's heads around because they're
Yep.
looking for that exact thing that's a drop-in replacement. Like, well, there are philosophical differences between VMware and Microsoft on how they
Yep.
approach things, and so you may not find a drop-in replacement. You're going to come at things with a little bit different mentality, especially
Yep.
networking. You'll hear me hammer that drum a lot. It's like the networking is radically different on approaches, philosophies, functionality, everything. So,
Sure
but you
is.
can still do what you're trying to do, but you're gonna have to think about it differently.
Yep. For sure. Well, I think that's a good first episode, Eric. I think we covered a lot. We covered our core topic. We introduced ourselves in the show and Project Runspace. What do you think? Should we wrap this up? We got a couple of outro
We should
items
before
here.
we get off into some tangent and never get back. So
People are going to find that you and I end up going off on a lot of tangents, so we're going to have to keep that under wraps. So,
yeah,
but
and
anyway,
hopefully they'll keep us accountable and say, "Hey, you guys, you said you were going to talk about this, 3 months ago. Where's that? Where are you?" So,
and that's perfect. That's a nice segue into the fact that one of the key things, the core ideas for this show that I have is I want to make it so you can talk to us when you want to. And so I'm still kind of brainstorming what that looks like long term. I'm thinking maybe something like a Discord community eventually or something like that could be fun. But for the moment, you can contact us by contact at sysadminweekly.com. That will get you right to Eric and I, and we'll try to get back to you as soon as we can. We both have day jobs, of course, right? But we'll get back to you as soon as we can. And if you have a comment that you want shared on the show, or you have a question that you want answered on the show, I would love to have that type of interaction with all of you. So looking forward to that. And maybe if I can talk Eric into it, we'll eventually shift the show to a live stream recording and then post those as episodes after the fact, right? So, because live is fun. Anything can happen, right?
fine.
You don't look impressed over there.
Yeah, anything can happen, man. That is a big phrase.
Anything can happen. Anyway. Well, with that, if you want access to any other great content that Eric and I work on, you can always go out to projectrunspace.org. We're always posting stuff out there. Eric more so than I these days. Of course, I've got my website as well, too, that I post on occasionally, andyontech.com. Yeah, anything I missed there, Eric, that's we want to share as resources?
Sounds good to me. You know what? We'll have more episodes. We can always figure it out.
That's right. That's right. Well, I guess that wraps us up for the day. It's good having you here for episode 1. Looking forward to doing more episodes with you, Eric. This is going to be a fun one, I think.
This is going to be a good time. So here we go.
For sure. Well, folks, thanks for spending some time with us today. Really enjoyed having you, and hope to see you for future episodes, again, of the SysAdmin Weekly Podcast. We'll be coming to you weekly. That's kind of in the name, right? See what we did there? SysAdmin Weekly. Anyway, we're past the amount of time where I'm putting coherent, normal thoughts together. So I think that's my indication that we should wrap it up. Thanks for watching, folks. We'll catch you again next week for another episode of the SysAdmin Weekly Podcast. Have a good one.